I'm closing off this story of our research project today by talking about, together with Jill and Seamus, the way the teachers seemed to cross boundaries between school and university, but also the way we as researchers seemed to cross boundaries that existed between the school sites and the university over the course of this project. So in the next 15 to 20 minutes, we really intend to unpack how messy this is. We know that professional learning that is impactful consists of both formal and structured programs. So that is very much in line with the specifications that we were given by the department, but also with our knowledge and expertise as teacher educators and course designers. But there's also informal processes where teachers come to think differently as they reflect on aspects of their practice. And in line with that, there were some things that we intended for them to do in the way the course was structured that Russell has already highlighted. So we tried to cultivate a focus on students, and we were also, we know that professional learning, there are strategic ways to ensure that there's a greater impact on everyone in the system. And in a moment, I'll talk about the chasm between the university and the schools with whom we were working, and how we tried to traverse that chasm so as to engage not just the teachers, but to kind of, I guess, recruit them as change agents to a broader discussion about what effective science and mathematics teaching and learning might look and feel like. And this is very much in line with an awareness and an understanding that professional learning is situated in contexts. Now, the Linda's report, together with colleagues drawing on the TOOF Summit from 2021, highlights some of the complexities here. So we know that time is a challenge. That's the prevailing narrative. Teachers are time poor, and there is a financial burden to further studies. So funding for schools is important, but what we're talking about today is the conditions for learning that actually go beyond time and money, because those are two things that this program did put in place. But as you'll see through some of the data snapshots that we're about to share, there was much more to it when it came time for teachers to think about translating what they were learning into their classroom practice. And so this research has an important role to play in informing a broader understanding about the range of conditions that are essential if we're going to promote growth and support the development of out-of-field teachers. So we're going to share some survey data collected from the teachers at different points in their coursework learning. And this, we're just hoping to kind of share with you the process of data analysis, which is in its early stages. And so we hope that you might engage with us in what you think about this. So when we first looked at the data, we had early, mid and post surveys, and we started to identify what we're describing as an experiential trajectory. So the teachers came to the course very aspirational, as Linda has already shared. We then identified that they were soon engulfed in this, in the challenge of striving. So striving with being a university student again, being required to prepare academic submissions, being required to experiment with ideas in their setting, and also being required to do all of that while throwing everything online during COVID lockdown. So, and that's very present in the data. But in the post data, we're also seeing stories of transformation where even if the teachers kind of said this was all very, very hard, at the end, they were able to reflect and talk about changes in their practice that had been guided by the process of learning. So we've started to theorise by looking at the data that there are essentially 3 pillars, and we'll share some data snapshots in a moment that make this very clear. So we can see that there are people who enabled a productive learning journey, or perhaps impeded a productive learning journey. We can also see that there are school level practices that provided support, or again, that impeded local experimentation and translation of learning. And then we're exploring the idea that there were seemingly immovable structures and constraints that the teachers encountered. And as we're about to show you, this is not straightforward. So, you know, in some schools there were factors that were very enabling, and in other schools the same factor couldn't be worked around. So in order to kind of convey this story, Seamus and Jill are going to talk in the voice of the quotes, if you like, to highlight the juxtapositions or the light and shade. So Seamus, I believe you're kicking off.
Yeah, I'm starting. So this is a quote from a mid-survey. Start with a good news story. So here's an example of a school leader, you know, the people really encouraging and supporting the teacher on this journey. When I looked at it, I tried to highlight a few bits just to get you to look at it more closely, but I was interested that this person, you know, uses the negative in a way of saying, never made me feel guilty for doing the course. And this idea of that, you know, the school leader knows, has given them a bit of faith, as in, you know, a bit of assurance that, yes, you can have a good crack at this. It's a very Australian phrase. It's this idea that they'll have a good attempt at it. And that was made possible because of the flexible work arrangements. So the flexible work arrangements, you know, being able to have the school leadership, be able to move things around for them to do this. This was just, you know, just 2 examples of that.
Thanks. This one was a bit in contrast to that one, unfortunately, whereas this teacher said, my school leader insisted we attend school for the day of study. So I've got the whole day online, of course, because we're in lockdown. No school Wi-Fi was provided, as they had trouble accessing some of the Deakin systems that their schools had set in place, blocking our things. So they had to hotspot off their personal phones. There was no space at school to study for the day. So we had to study in a shared office. So you can just imagine the challenge by these. They knew if they could work from home and study online from home, everything would be smooth. They'd have good Wi-Fi and they would be able to hear and talk in class, but that wasn't what happened for them.
And here's another one from maths saying that they would sort of felt that they had to teach. So here we are, you know, perhaps demonstrating a few different ways, you know, some of the pedagogy, as Russell said, you know, how incorporating the pedagogy into their teaching, and yet they feel somewhat constrained and challenged that they sort of have to do the same way that the rest of the school is doing, that they're at a school where there's lots of people. And so if I was to incorporate any change into my practice, it would have to be school-wide. I would have to be doing something differently that therefore all the teachers would have to do the same. So this, and I like the one there at the end there thinking about, you know, they felt like here we are getting them to reposition their thinking and how they could approach their teaching. And yet again, this concept of, you know, commercial programs, things that are available to schools to support teaching. And here's a teacher who feels that they still have to do that in some way, despite what this, you know, this university course is presenting to them as, let's just say, an alternative.
And this teacher also was really felt constrained by their colleagues and also the traditional practices So the current maths teacher's not interested in changing or sharing. They're unwilling to help, to try anything. There's lack of access or use of digital technologies at their school. And the teachers just couldn't, other teachers couldn't see a reason to develop any knowledge or practice in the area.
Here's an example of actually getting some good support in their school. So they've got a colleague, you know, they've been teaching for a long time, they're science trained, and they're not just there as a sort of a wealth of content knowledge. They're there as someone who's really as a practical mentor that they can bounce ideas off. They can share practices perhaps they've got from the course and bring it and discuss it with this colleague. The quote finishes thinking about, well, actually they have been trying out these pracs, and so this idea about that they bit of a trial, you know, they can actually try some of the things out from the course. Perhaps they do it with that mentor, so this science colleague that they seem to have buddied up with quite well. They feel like that this is coming through, and following on from what Linda was saying before, is that it's actually a practical demonstration of their confidence growing through this experience.
And this one is really illustrating the challenges. Part of this is the challenge of teaching full time and being enrolled in a course, but also being online and being in a pandemic. And they always saw, of course, their immediate job of teaching their current school students as taking priority over the course.
I think it's the last one for me. Focusing more on some of these seemingly immovable structures. Here's one of the teachers reflecting on that they'd just gone through university. You know, they felt like, oh, I've been here, done this, and they sort of knew that there would be some theoretical underpinning because there had to be. That's, you know, a structure of a course. It has to go through university accreditation. The university would expect that to be part of the course. Here's a teacher who sort of knew that was coming, but didn't like it. That they still would have preferred just to have a lot of time on content, a lot of time on practical. They wanted more hands-on experience. They didn't necessarily like that there had to be some theoretical underpinning to the course, even though they knew it was going to come because that was a seemingly immovable object. And
this last one, but very positive, so that most of the time, at least, that the course was actually provided valuable resources for them, and they felt that they could try them, and also they could actually see that, like all teaching, sometimes you try it and it works, sometimes you try it and it doesn't.
Still going. I thought I had one more. And here's an example of, yeah, again, thinking about university, and as you've heard through the talks already, this idea about embedding technology, not just for technology's sake, but actually having it incorporated into investigation, inquiry-based learning, some of those pedagogies that really come through to the fore and can be maximized by the incorporation of technology. Here's a teacher really saying, well, you know, I really changed my perspective of what I thought mathematics teaching was, because they could shift from sort of a rote procedural way to thinking about how they can incorporate investigation and inquiry into their teaching.
So as you can see, implicit in a lot of those comments is there were things that the teachers were asked to do as part of their learning, often as part of their assessment processes, that weren't necessarily easy because of things that were going on at the school site. And we're just starting to think about how individual teachers responded, what some of their coping strategies were, and there are some contrasts here as well. And we've started to frame these in three ways. So we found teachers that were very boundaried. So I'll give you a moment to have a read of what being boundaried looks like. You know, which is interesting, because with the pandemic and that encroachment between home and work, I think, you know, this is something that a lot of teachers are learning to do. Bending. So in this instance, the individual teacher is the one that adapts. And I guess this aligns very nicely with what Linda was highlighting about what the teacher's motivations or what their why was, their reason why for doing the course. And then we saw examples of begging, and certainly more than one teacher referred specifically, used this language of having to beg, which reveals something of the power dynamic that they were experiencing at their schools, and where this program and their role as a teacher learner within the program, how it was viewed at the school level. So just some concluding remarks. It's clear that school leaders and in-field colleagues, together with curriculum enactment practices, facilitated and challenged experimentation with research-informed pedagogies and digital technology. So there was much more to it than just the provision of money, time and money. And, you know, from a design perspective, the things that we did quite intentionally to generate a scholarship of practice and influence school level change worked in some settings, but not others. Entrenched school practices, together with the limitations of teaching through the pandemics, mediated the effect of this scholarship, and so what we're trying to tease out is, you know, what was pandemic related and what wasn't. And it does seem that setting that aside, upskilling out of field teachers is not just a matter of fixing individuals. It does require unified action from a range of supporting players across the system and at the school level.